This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/intotheportal. Imagine finding yourself in the middle of a pristine landscape long untouched by human influence, on the brink of uncovering the remnants of a lost civilization largely unknown to the modern world. A treasure you've been searching for over multiple decades and several expeditions worth of time, money, and effort. This is where Steve Elkins and his team of researchers and documentarians found themselves in February of 2015 after being airdropped into an unnamed valley in the heart of the Honduran Rainforest, a place long since referred to as Portal del Infierno, or rather, the Gates of Hell. What they uncovered has since greatly contributed to Hondurans' recovery of their ancient past. Their incredible efforts were captured on film in the documentary project The Lost City of the Monkey God, released this year and currently in the festival circuit. And we have Steve Elkins himself on the show to speak on a special bonus episode of Into the Portal to follow up on our Lost City of the Monkey God series.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. We have got some amazing bonus content for you all today regarding our Lost City of the Monkey God series.
That's right.
Yes, so today we are speaking with none other than Steve Elkins, award-winning filmmaker and leader of the 2015 expedition to the Mosquito Rainforest to uncover the mystery of the Lost City of the Monkey God. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great, Amber. How are you?
I am incredible. Just to be talking to you.
She's ecstatic right now. She's kind of like vibrating a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, that's good. You know, I do want to say one thing. I appreciate you saying that about the 2015 expedition, but that was only that was not the first expedition.
Correct.
This particular phase of the project started in 2012 when we did the LiDAR survey.
Right.
And it then took 3 years after that to organize the actual ground truthing expedition.
Okay. All right. So.
Plus, all that was preceded by several expeditions I did in the 1990s.
That's right. I mean, that 1994 expedition, when you guys found those first kind of remnants of some sort of civilization, that was really incredible.
And that carving, that stone carving.
That's right.
Right. That carving was definitely an epiphany moment. I mean, there had been obviously there was a legend circulating for a very long time, and I do have a background in the geosciences and in archaeology, at least when I was in school. And so I had an understanding of these things. And when we were in the jungle, far up in the mountains, far away from any human habitation, you could barely see 20 feet in front of you. And there's this boulder next to a small river with a carving of a man with a kind of a strange hat or headdress on, or mask,
right,
stick, and what looked like a gourd with seeds falling out of it. I immediately thought, why is this carving in a place like this? This meant there had been something going on in the past that's not obvious now. It probably was not the same environment that it is now.
Right.
So that was, for me, a big epiphany moment.
Totally.
Just the extent to which the landscape could have been previously modified by human populations, hey?
Exactly. And plus, natural sources. Like now, our climate is always changing. Climate is really just an aggregate of many weather events over time, and it's constantly changing. So in the past, we know that the climate was different than it is now, and it may have been back then, and certainly humans modify the earth wherever they go. In fact, I often say the role of humans in the ecology is we're terraformers, to use a word from Star Trek. Wherever we go, we're changing the environment. In In fact, all living things do that. We just do it to a great extent.
I absolutely love your Star Trek references that popped up in a few of your lectures and stuff like that. Goodbye, Indiana Jones, and I'm going with Captain Kirk.
Right.
Absolutely
Exactly.
love that.
I'm no idiot.
So, I mean, okay, I got a question for you here, Steve, because we're really curious about sort of the beginning of your fascination with the Lost City, because we've both read Douglas Preston's book, and he discusses how you were, already intimately familiar with this case, from the mid-1990s and your 1994 expedition and all that kind of stuff, when you were already working with Ron Blum and NASA conducting these satellite surveys. But just how far back does your connection go with this story? Can you kind of recall the moment when you remembered first hearing about the Lost City?
Absolutely. Prior to in the 1990s, I was working in the television business. I was a cinematographer and occasionally a producer, and I also was partners in a camera equipment rental company. So we owned hundreds of cameras and editing systems that we rented out to other production companies and to the networks. We also did a lot of what I call contract production, meaning, let's say you were a producer, you had the idea, you raised the money, and you say you want to do this TV show, you would contract my company to actually do the work.
Very cool.
We didn't do the creative, but we did the actual work.
Okay.
I got bored with that and wanted to do something more exciting and more creative. So I put the word out. If anybody had any interesting ideas, particularly that dealt with science and adventure, because that was my personal passion. I was introduced to an adventurer named Steve Morgan, who had written 50 short stories about adventures he had done or wanted to do. I read them, and I fell in love with the one about Lost City of Monkey God. Steve then told me that, hey, I'm looking for it now, and it's really inexpensive to do expeditions and productions in Honduras, plus I got a lot of great connections. I can arrange everything. You want to do it? I said, yep, let's go. So we organized it and went, not really knowing what I was in for.
Man, that's kind of crazy, really. I mean, kind of going in blind, so to speak, in a way.
Exactly. You don't really hear about that too much in this century. It was more so in the early 20th and then the 19th. Hey, you get that wave of exploration. It just really brings to mind all that to me.
Totally, the Percy Fawcett's of the world. So you're the modern day version.
Well, there really is a lot of exploration going on, although the style changes because much of the obvious places have been explored, but there's a whole new wave of exploration happening. And I often tell this when I give lectures, particularly to younger people. My personal belief is that we are entering probably the greatest period of exploration in human history ever. Why? Because of the advance of remote sensing technology. We are now able to see things we couldn't even have imagined just a few years ago, and it'll even get more so as time goes on. So even though we think we've found everything and we've seen things, there are many things hidden that will soon be revealed to us through our technology.
That's just so exciting to hear that come out of your mouth, because I mean, a lot of people would say that we're past all that, right? I feel like that's sort of that's something we come across a lot with our show, is that people think everything's been discovered. That's really, really great to hear.
Exactly.
No, I'm going to give you two examples if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not too many years ago, some archaeologists using remote sensing technology, and there's many remote sensing technologies, LiDAR is just one of them, and they discovered that the Maya actually had very well-defined port cities along the Caribbean coast, and they had cargo boats, and they traded probably all the way up in North America and other places.
Ooh.
And how did they find this? Because they were able to see the remnants of the wooden structures, the chemical signatures that they leave in the soil, subsurface from the coastal waters and in the coastal areas in the land. They didn't build their port cities out of stone like they did in places like Copan, but they built them out of wood, and it perished. But it leaves a signature, and with these new technologies, they can see it. So there's a whole new part of man culture that people never knew. In fact, one of the archaeologists gave a lecture at the Smithsonian a number of years ago, and he dubbed the Caribbean the American Mediterranean. So you can figure out what he meant by that.
Wow.
The other thing, so a couple of years ago, one of the engineers on my team, a LiDAR engineer by the name of Dr. Juan Carlos Fernandez Diaz, who happens to be Honduran but lives here in the States, he's done a lot of these LiDAR surveys, and he was contracted from a consortium of scientists and governments to do a survey of the Pan jungle in Guatemala. They wanted to see if this jungle had lost cities or whatever was underneath it. No one really knew. They knew where these great Mayan sites all over the place, but no one knew what was in between. They just thought it was this impenetrable jungle.
Right.
Well, they did the survey in 2016, and last year they revealed that what they found was an article in National Geographic, and it turns out that the entire jungle was quite urbanized in the past.
Wow.
So this changes the population estimates of the ancient Mayan population by a tremendous degree.
Right.
I can guarantee you that we're finding out in places all over the world, and now even in polar areas with melting glaciers, people were everywhere and in greater numbers than were ever thought in the past. And again, why? Because our new technology allows us to see things we never could see just with our own five senses.
Oh, man.
It's really incredible. I can't even. That's amazing. Those port cities. I would love to look into that a little bit further.
No
Andrew.
kidding. Yeah, that's
future episode.
Definitely, no doubt.
Yeah. Getting back to just specifically your expeditions, and even just let's just jump to that moment of discovery when you had that dawning realization. You saw the results of the LiDAR. From that moment to treading your first footsteps on that pristine, centuries-long, untouched ground of that unnamed valley. Just what are some of the ways that this venture has impacted you personally and your life overall?
Well, it's impacted me a tremendous amount. First, I've been pursuing this since basically 1994, so that's a lot of years.
Yeah.
And most of my friends and family would hear me talk about it, and they tell me to shut up after a while. I say, oh, okay, all right, right. Yeah. And to be able to say that I was not full of it, and I was actually right, was a great feeling of satisfaction, and still is.
No kidding.
Oh,
In fact, my wife used to tell me, if you mention this again in this house, I'm leaving. Now she's very ecstatic that I mentioned it.
Oh, that was one of my big questions. I was wondering how your wife feels today about all of this.
Right,
So she's
yeah.
kind of turned around, hey?
Well, yeah, she turned around. She still kind of gets tired of hearing about it because it has taken over a part of our life, but she's very happy that it worked out and very proud that I was able to do this. Now, the other thing is that when we saw the LiDAR results, I had a lot. Oh, let me turn off this phone. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
No worries.
We're usually dealing with cats and dogs over on our end over here. We locked them all away for this.
I got it. I took the battery out of this other phone line. So let's see. Where was I? Oh, give me a hint here. I just lost track of that.
Oh,
Where
yes.
were we? Yeah.
Just with the LiDAR and when you saw those results. And
Right.
Oh, yeah. When I saw the result of the LiDAR, I had a lot at stake here. We were spending a lot of money. I convinced a lot of people to go along with the program here. I had arranged things with the Honduran government, so everybody was counting on me to produce something. So I was rather anxious, to say the least. And when the LiDAR engineer on one morning, I was actually having breakfast with Doug Preston, comes running at me saying, there's something in the valley. You got to come over and look at it. My heart almost came out of my mouth. I was so excited.
Oh,
We
man.
ran there, and then we saw it, and all of us are just doing cartwheels. In fact, we went over there. We stayed at this really posh resort on the island of Roatan, which is a story in itself. But immediately after looking at the LiDAR images, we went over to the little bar on the beach and treated ourselves and toasted ourselves for quite a while.
Yeah, no doubt.
Very excited.
Seriously.
no kidding.
And then secondarily, three years later, actually organizing the ground expedition, which was really much more difficult than the LiDAR mission. There were so many safety issues, so many politics, so much logistics involved. And setting down in that helicopter on the site for the first time, to me, was like going on holy ground. I couldn't believe that after all these years, here I was standing on the place that I've been looking for all these years, and I had all these scientists and all these people, and everything happened. It was It's hard to describe the feeling.
No kidding. That's incredible. It's an experience that I hope that I can have someday with something along these lines. I mean, we know that this has had a huge impact, obviously, on Honduras, the legacy of this lost city. Can you give us kind of the latest updates on the ground? What's kind of going on there right now?
Sure. Actually, the first serious archaeological excavation started in early 2016 and is continuing to this day. They have different teams. First, we had an international team that went down there, which was partially supported by National Geographic and mostly supported by the government of Honduras. And since then, it's predominantly been the Hondurans have really stepped up to the cause and have been sending their own teams out there for the last several years. Now, they go out for a few weeks at a time, they take a break, and then they have to break, for example, during the rainy season. It's pretty impossible to be there. And they're going back. In fact, they just came back, and I think they're getting ready to go again soon. They continue to find more and more things. They're surveying some of the other sites that we found, and actually, I believe, have been able to carbon date some things which turn out to be much older than we thought, but they haven't officially announced it, so I can't tell you exactly what they did.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, we're looking forward to that.
Some other things they found which they did announce. They found some round stone spheres, which are similar to these enigmatic round spheres that they found in Costa Rica a long time ago. So this immediately, you say, obviously there was some kind of cultural contact, which is not surprising. We think there was a lot of cultural contact over wide parts of North America, South America, and Central America.
Right.
This is just one more piece in the puzzle. This work is continuing.
Right.
In addition, we had noticed in our flyovers that a lot of this forest was being deforested illegally. And cattle ranches were being set up, and it was growing like a cancer.
Right.
While we were there, we realized, and so did all the scientists with us, that this rainforest was very special ecologically. And we kind of felt an obligation that now we had given all this publicity to it, and we could realize what's going on, we had to try and steer the course of the future of this area to save it so further archaeological studies can occur, and more importantly, to save it for its ecology. So it's over the past couple years, we've finally been able to form a foundation, which just became official at the end of December, called the Caja Camasa Foundation. Caja Camasa is the Pesh, which is one of the older indigenous groups, their word for White City or Ciudad Blanca.
Right.
Oh, beautiful.
And the mandate of the foundation is to continue to promote scientific research of both the archaeology and the natural environment, as well as figure out ways to keep conserving it. Because it turns out, after we had commissioned actually a biological survey of the area in 2017 with Conservation International, that there are species of animals they thought were extinct are still living there, and they found some new species. And it's a very special place in the wildlife corridor throughout Central America and connecting North and South America. So if this rainforest, the Mesquite, which is mainly in Honduras but also partially in Nicaragua, if it fails ecologically, there'll be a cascading effect of ecological failures throughout that part of our hemisphere. There aren't too many places like this left. So this is really a frontline battle, and we've got several major NGOs from the United States involved in helping come up with a plan and enacting strategies to protect this area, both archaeologically and biologically.
Well, that's just such good news. I mean,
that really is, because like when I read through Douglas Preston's book, he did make several comments about just that, right? How pristine, how untouched, and even like that. What was it? Those monkeys that were stationed above his where he had camped out, and how normally those monkeys would never be seen around human populations, but because of the fact that this had been so untouched for so long, they just didn't even have a reference point, so they were completely fine with people being there. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
And what other examples were there? There was all those different types of plants. I believe, wasn't there an ethnobotanist on that 2015 expedition?
Yes. Dr. Mark Plotkin from Harvard, a very famous ethnobotanist, by the way.
Oh, right. Mark.
He was with us, and he said this place is spectacular and has been a very big champion of what we're doing. In addition, I mentioned that we have two NGOs working with the foundation now from the U.S. One of them is Wildlife Conservation Society, which also runs the Bronx Zoo. They've been around for well over a century.
Oh,
Very
wow.
5-star rated charitable organization. Very active in wildlife conservation, obviously. And Global Wildlife Conservation, whose chief biologist is a fellow named Russ Mittermeier, who is one of the world's foremost primate experts and is up there with Jane Goodall.
Wow.
So prior to getting all this together, nobody really paid much attention, but now these organizations have come in, jumped in with both feet, and are actively working with the Hondurans and the foundation in coming up with strategies to preserve this place and keep it going. So that's a great satisfaction to know that our efforts have turned into something that's actually having a global legacy.
Absolutely.
Hopefully make the world a better place in some small way.
That is really incredible. And even just the fact that the Hondurans themselves have taken the initiative and really contributed to this national legacy, I find that just so integral to that sort of rebuilding and just a way forward in the future. One question I have, though, you did mention that it's kind of been handed over to Honduran authorities, like archaeologists and all those types of teams coming in. I do have a question, though. Is Chris Fisher still involved with the expedition or excavation, I should say?
Not that I know of at this time. I mean, he was involved for quite a while, and he unfortunately suffered. He was infected with the leishmaniasis parasite.
Right.
He had a tough time with it, and I think he was kind of saying, I'm not going back to the rainforest again after that. It was interesting because there are many people got it, and some people, they don't care, they go back. But some people got affected worse than others.
Right.
And so he has not been active in it, although he's just recently published a scientific paper in PLOS. That's the organization that publishes papers that are free for anybody to look at, along with some of his colleagues, and it was quite good. I don't have the name of it in front of me.
We'll have to go look that up.
LiDAR survey. Plus, Chris is involved in his own LiDAR project, which he started before he got involved with me. Down in Mexico. He made a really brilliant discovery of his own.
Oh my gosh, yes. What team was that again? I remember reading about that really briefly. The name is escaping me now.
I think the pronunciation is Angamuco.
Okay.
It's a site that was I believe the site was known, but they had no idea just how large it was.
Okay.
Or maybe it wasn't, maybe they just suspected it. It's a much more open area, more arid than the rainforest where we're at. And he had used LiDAR before I did, and quite successfully. In fact, that's why I had him come on the project, because he was one of the very few archaeologists that understood LiDAR and had worked with it.
Right.
Strangely, some of our critics had never done that. And they said, well, how come you're using Chris Fisher? And I said, well, because he's one of the very few people who know what the heck he's doing when it comes to interpreting LiDAR for archaeology.
Well, we're so glad that you teamed up with him, that's for sure. I want to come back to...
I mean, now a lot of people everyone's using it now. It's sort of the technology du jour.
Right. Yeah, super mainstream now. I guess back when you guys were first using it, I mean, what was the device that was like a coffee can size that was only like military grade, and it was like crazy hard for you to get it out of the country?
In the airborne, this is for airborne LiDAR.
Right.
You can use LiDAR terrestrially. In fact, they make little handheld LiDAR units these days for a few $1,000. They look like bobbleheads.
Oh, no way.
It's such an amazing technology. You could walk into the room that you're in, and in seconds, LiDAR scan everything in that room down to about a couple millimeters.
Wow.
And recreate it in 3D on a computer, or print it out on a 3D printer, or whatever you want to do with it.
Wow.
So it's quite amazing.
That's phenomenal.
Surveying large areas from an airplane requires a much bigger, much more powerful, much more expensive machine.
Right.
And because you're flying in an aircraft that's flying fast, you have all these navigational things. So the LiDAR, airborne LiDAR units have what they call an IMU. It's an inertial measurement unit, like a guidance device. It's the same thing that they put in guided missiles.
Right.
So the missiles know exactly where they are in space.
Crazy.
So this technology is controlled by the State Department. We weren't allowed to take it out of the country without a special permit from the State Department, an export license to use it. So they vet that to make sure it's not going to fall into the hands of people they don't want them to have it.
Of
our
course.
enemies, so to speak.
Right.
It's anyway. So at the time, and it's less so now than in the past, because this technology it's all over the place now.
Totally.
We had to get special permits to use this thing, and it was problematic at the time. Not that it was impossible to do, but bureaucracy in our government and with various agencies got in the way, and we almost wound up having to scrub the mission because the permit got screwed up.
Oh, no.
And fortunately, one of our other expedition members had a connection with a senator that had a lot of power. He made a phone call, and boom.
Well, thank goodness.
We got the permit.
It seems like a lot of things like that kind of happened with the expedition where you hit road bumps, but then things kind of like fell into place like they were meant to be in a way, which is kind of nice.
Exactly. It's interesting you say that because we joke about it being the monkey guy, that he's playing with us. And he always makes it work out. Even when we think we're prone to failure and it's all falling apart, he pulls a rabbit out of the hat each time.
That's yeah, totally.
That's great.
I wanted to ask you just to come back around to the leash and the dangers in the jungle, because I know you went out of your way to hire some British SAS, guys who had experience in the jungle. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about them and kind of like what the people on the ground were most kind of worried about and things like that during the expedition.
All right, well, you got two different questions there. You got one about leishmaniasis and the other about the SAS guys.
True.
Two different topics there.
Let's
go
about
SAS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when we're planning the ground expedition, we realized, we had quite a few people, and we wanted to make sure that we would stay alive. I mean, I've been in the jungle a lot of times, but I don't consider myself a jungle expert.
Right.
Fair enough.
So we wanted to make sure that regardless of whatever happened to us, whatever bad things might befall us, we had a fighting chance to survive. So we asked around different people, and I was introduced to 3 former British SAS jungle warfare experts that had a company, and they would go out and provide security for wealthy individuals or expeditions, or did shows like Bear Grylls and stuff like that to make survivor, make sure that nobody died. And I said, okay, these guys sound good. And I happened to be on a trip for business to London where I went to meet them at the Special Forces Club, which is a whole nother story in itself.
Okay.
Fabulous story. Right out of a James Bond movie.
Oh, we'll have to get you back on.
These 3 guys who, just see them on the street, you'd never think anything, just 3 regular guys. And they knew who I was, and they took me to this place where they would not give the address. I had to walk there. They didn't blindfold me, though. So maybe I could find it again.
Oh, there you go.
And we go into this really cool private club. Just what you think it would look like is what it looked like. And we sat in this room with a fireplace and big sofas and had some drinks and some snacks. And we talked about going to the jungle and would they do it and could they do it. And in an hour, I felt comfortable. They were comfortable. We made a deal and we hired them.
Wow.
And they were probably one of the best decisions we made because they were able to help us set up camp and made sure everyone stayed safe.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, at the end of the expedition, Bill Bennettson, my partner in this, and I congratulated ourselves in that nobody got seriously hurt.
Yep.
Nobody died. Mm-hmm. Everyone was fine. Until 6 weeks later, we found out about leishmaniasis.
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, bit of not the most pleasant surprise, obviously. And of course, Preston wrote extensively about his experience having to deal with that. I mean, luckily you didn't get it.
No.
Yeah, I mean, definitely something nasty. And I wasn't aware of it until we read his book.
Oh, gosh, I know. Right?
So,
and the fact that it's even just spreading, hey? It's going up into North America, Texas and Alabama, did you say? That one
Texas and Oklahoma. It's been endemic there for a couple of years. And I'm sure it's in other states, but they haven't found it. It's basically the parasite it needs the blood of a mammal and the gut of a female sandfly to complete its life cycle. Mm-hmm. And it's totally temperature dependent. It has a certain minimum temperature range that it survives in. Doesn't matter if it's a desert or it's a rainforest. So in fact, leishmaniasis is quite prevalent in the Mideast.
Okay.
Oh.
And much to we knew that leishmaniasis was certainly something that could be contracted in the jungle, but we considered it a low risk. We had no idea it was such a high risk. It turns out that many of our soldiers coming back from the wars in the Mideast were contracting the Mideastern version of leishmaniasis, often referred to as the Baghdad boil or the Jericho button. It's been around there for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
And the Department of Defense was very concerned about it, and so they started funding the National Institute of Health in Bethesda to study it, when they still are. They have a research lab where they actually grow the parasite, and they're trying to figure out how to combat it because there are no real vaccines nor particularly pleasant ways to put it in remission, shall we say.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty scenario.
No.
Pretty nasty.
For some
Definitely not.
strange reason, some people are immune to it. Apparently I am, because I've never gotten it in all the times I've been down there in the jungle.
Crazy.
But other
that's
people are not. And nobody knows why.
Oh, wow. Another mystery to uncover. Eh?
Yeah,
I guess
no
we're
kidding.
safe up in here in Canada for now.
For now.
Well,
Yes.
according to the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, if current climate trends continue, they expect it to reach the Canadian border by about 2050 or 2060.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. Well, we'll be moving up to the
You got
Yukon,
a
I
few
suppose.
decades.
Well, we're getting down to the end of our time here. One other question that we do have is obviously the status of the documentary, The Lost City, the Monkey God. Can you tell us about that? Is it in festival circuits right now, where it's being featured, all that kind of thing?
Well, yes, thank you for asking. It was actually in your neck of the woods a couple months ago at the Vancouver Film Festival.
Oh, no.
We missed it.
And then there was the same draft played in San Francisco at the Mill Valley Festival. But most importantly, it's been modified since then, and the final version is screening in Washington, D.C. on March 16th. There's
Very
the
cool.
Environmental Film Festival, D.C. It's become quite a popular festival.
Very cool.
And they're putting it in the Carnegie Institute for Science, which is a fabulous location, a great theater,
awesome.
a beautiful building.
That's
So
amazing.
we are actually having a number of invited guests there, so a lot of VIPs, and plus the general public can get tickets and go see it, see the film, although they can't go to the reception, unfortunately.
Right.
And that should be a pretty big deal. So March 16th, you'll probably start hearing a lot about it, and then where it will be shown next, I don't know. We're negotiating on a few deals right now, and I'm not really sure. My partner, Bill Benenson, is the one who's handling that.
Right, right.
Okay.
Well, we're so excited to see it. We're on pins and needles, definitely. And I mean, maybe we can even follow up with you after it's released and have a little chat afterwards. We can't wait to see it.
Sure, absolutely. I think the two of you are great, and happy to talk to you anytime.
Aw, well, thank you.
We really appreciate that, Steve. It means a lot. We're you're the biggest interview we've had yet on Into the Portal, so it's an honor.
It really is.
Well, when Enter the Portal becomes a globally recognized podcast, and you're famous, and everybody wants a piece of you, remember.
Oh, we will.
Oh, we certainly will. Oh, man, this has been incredible, Steve. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
We'll keep in contact.
Please do, and I really appreciate your interest. I'm always happy when people ask intelligent questions and really, understand a lot of the story.
Oh, well, again, we really appreciate that. That's super flattering.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we'll be in contact.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, that was awesome.
That was crazy. That was really fun.
That was super, super fun. Thank you again to Steve.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll be able to reconnect with him again in the near future when the film is available for everybody to see.
Yes.
And we have a little tidbit about that at the very end of this as well. But
Exactly.
We wanted to go through some of this because, I mean, that was, he had a lot to say.
Yeah.
And
he's
first
really...
and foremost, whoops, because in our in our 2-part series, we said that Steve was in his 70s and he's actually younger, so that was
It was a guesstimation.
guesstimation.
My bad.
Did you pull that from Wikipedia and it wasn't quite right or something? Or anyway, our math was way off, so we apologize, Steve. And he is 68, not in his 70s, and still rocking it hard.
Or turning 68, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, upcoming birthday. Happy early birthday. The other thing that he mentioned that was really interesting was that Chris Fisher recently published a paper that we are really excited to look into. So we're going to dig that up.
I was just on his website, and I didn't find the paper quite yet. But once we find that, we'll post it on our socials for you guys.
Definitely.
So, so we can all take a look at that one. That seems super fascinating. What else? Okay, what was one of the main things that was just like stood out to you about that?
Well, I mean, he definitely left me with, all of us, with the cliffhanger of his juicy story with hiring the SAS guys at the club in the UK. That sounded super interesting. I really want to get that.
Another thing we didn't get out of him, too, was any stories about Bruce Heinicke, which would have been awesome, but whatever, maybe next time.
Yeah, save it for a later date, and I really look forward to reconnecting with Steve. But I think, I don't know, like, I think that was just, it was just really, it was just really neat to just get his perspective, straight from him. Even though we've watched the TED Talks, we've watched some stuff of his, and we've read Preston's book, super thorough, but just to like hear how much it really has impacted his life and still does, and just like the legacy that continues on in Honduras, because if it wasn't for this expedition, then these protective measures wouldn't be happening, and it's just so awesome. It's a really good. It's good feeling, It's one of those,
it is exactly
good feel
that.
Stories.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like even at the end of his TEDx talk, he really affirmed that notion that, like, you never really know how little or how much you can impact the world. But if you just sit back and just think about it or just talk about it and don't do anything about it, then you're not contributing, and you never know what can happen when you just decide to commit yourself to something.
Right.
And I think that's just incredibly inspiring. And
well, it makes me want to go searching for our own lost things, doesn't it? I mean, we're always trying to do that in a metaphorical way with the show. And we've talked about going into the field ourselves. But I mean, he made that comment about how we're heading into an era where we're more likely to make these discoveries when we've been typically told the opposite.
Well, that's kind of, that's really, that to me is so inspiring to hear that we're entering this next great age where we're not just probing in the dark, seeing less than 20 feet ahead of us. Yeah. We're seeing everything from above. And like, that's an incredible new perspective to bring to the field. And it's kind of funny because like, the way that he talked about it now is that this is widely used in the field. Like, this is the new norm. And if you're not a part of that, then you're kind of living in the antiquated past kind of thing in the field. And it was kind of funny, right? Because of those naysayers that were around initially. I'm sure they're still around. I'm sure there's still people that would say whatever, like, oh, you have to do the ground truthing. But it's funny, right? Because he is doing that. And,
exactly.
And now Honduras is doing that, which is incredible.
The entire the suggestion that that's not included when you, just because you start with LiDAR and with any other ground penetrating radar technology is absurd, because it's literally just cutting the time. I mean, the figure of speech would be in half, but it's way more than that. And then once you're actually on the ground in the significant areas, instead of wasting your time, you are just doing the same stuff, the hardcore stuff on the ground, which is what that team did. Yeah. And oh man, other than the fact that you could contract leash maniasis, which just sounds horrible. It does sound horrible. The worst. And I mean, we didn't
really get into that too much.
No, I mean, we didn't get into detail because he made the comment about how he has like an immunity to it, which is fascinating, right? You have to wonder if it's not really, the cure isn't the right word because it's a parasite, I guess, right? But the anti-leash antidote of some kind would lie in people that have this like natural buildup against it, possibly. But I mean, like, we didn't get into it, but the reason why it isn't as researched and funded and all this kind of stuff is because right now it only affects people in countries that don't have a ton of cash. So
that's not really true, because it is in the States now. So
slowly but surely there will be more and more and more funding and research, because it will start to affect more and more people that the CDC has, anyway.
And exactly that, even this example in this case will really highlight that and bring it into the limelight, possibly, and attract more funding. So, maybe there is an upside to it.
Definitely. What stood out to you?
What stood out?
I mean, I got to ask you. You asked me. It was the SAS.
I got a question. My hand's up.
Oh, hands up. Okay.
Yes.
Amber, yeah.
When Steve was giving us some examples of how this new technology is being used in other areas, and he mentioned those port cities.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Along the coast that were Mayan, right? That correct?
Yes.
Okay. That would, to me, kind of brings up this whole new layer of connectivity. Because he even mentioned, right, how this goes all the way up and down North and South and Central America, right? These people were highly interconnected. Yes. And it makes you wonder just how far their technology could have brought them.
Oh, well. Are we heading back to the everyone knows where my interests lie.
Exactly.
But no, that really is fascinating. I would love to try to trace some of those trade routes, especially on the West Coast here, like close to where we are, where I remember back in elementary school, or not necessarily, like middle school level, learning about like the Haida on the coast and their crazy canoe, like dugout boats and stuff. And they maybe would have had trade connections as well with some of these port cities that had way more massive populations than originally expected. And it's just so crazy. There's so much more to be discovered. I just want to go shopping for my my Indiana Jones gear and like go searching for things. Yeah.
Your indie gear. Okay there, buddy.
Okay, yeah.
Well, anyways, I wanted to touch on, before we wrap this up here, just the updates on Douglas Preston's book.
Right.
Because we got a quick email from Steve after the interview, and he just mentioned that Doug's book has actually once again become one of the bestsellers on the Wall Street list just this past week. For nonfiction ebook. So now it's an ebook, guys. So if you prefer to get your knowledge that way, it's a lot more accessible to people that way. But honestly,
cool.
I love the copy we have.
Well, we've had it for a while now, right? Like a few years,
well
and
used.
it's traveled around. I think it's come camping with us, and we've both read it like a few times, and it's got the pages are yellowing a little bit, and I just love that. So it's got that look. It's starting to get that look. It's perfect for Douglas Preston's books. So.
It's incredible. He's had a lot of success with it, and I'm really happy for him. Apparently, this book has already been published in 18 countries, and it's going to be in China pretty soon.
Wow.
So that's a huge market.
That's incredible.
That's going to be great.
I think maybe the next thing would be to try to reach out to Douglas Preston. That would be really, really fun.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. So I guess the only other thing to mention too is the fact that there is this upcoming showing of the Lost City of the Monkey God documentary in the DC area. So in Washington, unfortunately, we won't be able to attend.
A little far away for us. I can't believe we've been so crazy busy and we missed it in Vancouver. That would have been the closest for us.
That was so...
But can't wait to see it whenever we do get a chance.
Yeah.
I don't know if we do have any listeners out in the DC area, but if we do, hit us up if you have the opportunity to check us out.
Oh my gosh, yes. And we actually have a link from Steve himself, and we're going to post that in our show notes. So if you want to check it out and go see and buy tickets to this, and you can check it out here. I'll even just read it out here. It's just WATTPS and then ://DCEFF.org/film/lost-city-monkey-god.
Very thorough, Amber. Very thorough. Look at that. We will post it.
Yeah, we will post it.
Even if you just get the first part there with the .org, I think like it'll show probably the total list of what's going on. But it's supposed to be.
.coms, it's the .orgs.
Yeah, you mostly stick with the .govs. Hey, and if anybody knows what that's from, maybe we'll throw you a sticker or something like that. Show us out.
That's a little Easter egg right there. But you can also go and check out a preview of the documentary.
Yes.
And that's just at benisonproductions.com. I believe that's the correct link. But even if you just Googled Benison Productions Lost City of the Monkey God, it's going to pop up right away.
And it's a great little tease.
It's like 5 minutes long, and it's like, it just makes you want to watch it.
Yeah, it's more than just a trailer, but it doesn't like, it's not like, when I say trailer, you think like Hollywood trailer or whatever, right? But it's just, it's oh man, you're hooked when you watch it.
It's everything you're hoping for and more.
Exactly. So, I guess that kind of wraps this up for this bonus content that we are so thrilled to be able to offer you guys.
Yep.
And thank you so much for listening, and give us your feedback. Let us know what you think about this search for the Lost City and the ongoing excavations and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And if you've read Preston's book and everything else that we've been talking about. So email us intotheportalmailbox@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. We're at Into the Portal Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. So come hang out with us on there, and we love chatting with you guys. And you can hit us up on Twitter as well at Into the Portal 1. That's the number 1. Mm-hmm. So yeah, come chat with us on there as well. So until Sunday night.
Indeed.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.